r/NoSleep. If you break the carnival rules, they will find you. The carnival came every year in late October, setting up shop on the outskirts of town where the forest grew thick and the fog rolled in early. Everyone knew it was a strange carnival, but nobody cared. The rides were thrilling, the games were nearly impossible to win, and the performers were bizarrely unforgettable. This year, I was dragged there by my coworkers after another grueling day at the office. Our team lead, Brian, had decided that some fun bonding time would boost morale. It was the kind of forced fun that you couldn't refuse without being labeled a buzzkill. So, there we were, me, Brian, our ever-smiling receptionist Jill, the quiet IT guy Trevor, and our HR rep, Lisa, who insisted we carpool because it's better for the environment. The carnival lights flickered erratically, casting long, warped shadows across the dirt lot. As we approached the ticket booth, a clown in a shabby purple suit leaned out, his face painted in sickly greens and reds. 5 tickets, Brian said, slapping down a crisp $50 bill. The clown didn't respond. He just grinned wide enough to show too many teeth and slid the tickets under the glass. "Enjoy the show," he rasped. We entered through a creaking turnstile, and the eerie carnival music grew louder. The first thing we saw was a tall sign with a list of rules written in bright red paint. Carnival rules. 1. Never ride the same ride twice. 2. Do not touch the performers. 3. Do not enter restricted areas. 4. If you win a prize, you must keep it with you until you leave. 5. The carnival closes at midnight. Leave before then. "This is ridiculous," Trevor muttered, already regretting his decision to join us. "It's all part of the charm," Brian said, slapping Trevor on the back hard enough to make him stumble. We split up after that. Jill headed straight for the carousel, Lisa wandered toward the games, and Brian dragged Trevor toward the haunted house. I decided to explore on my own, sticking to the less crowded paths. The first thing I noticed was how strange the workers were. The guy running the ring toss had eyes like black marbles and a grin that stretched from ear to ear. The fortune teller's booth smelled like burning hair, and when she caught me looking, she gave a sharp-toothed smile and whispered, "You don't belong here." I laughed it off, thinking it was part of the act. When I found Lisa later, she was clutching a stuffed bear she'd won at a dart game. The thing looked wrong. Its fur was matted, and its glassy eyes seemed to follow me. "You're keeping that thing?" I asked. "Rule 4, she replied, shrugging. That's when the first odd thing happened. A group of teenagers raced past us, giggling and screaming. One of them had a carnival worker's hat, which they must have stolen. The worker they took it from, a clown with wild, spiraling eyes, just stood there, watching them. I swear his grin grew wider as they disappeared into the shadows. "Kids," Lisa said, rolling her eyes. But I couldn't shake the uneasy feeling. By the time I found Jill again, she was riding the carousel. She looked pale and unsteady as the painted horses bobbed up and down. "Jill, you okay?" I called. She nodded, but when the ride ended, the operator, a towering man with skeletal fingers, blocked her path. "One ride per guest," he said in a gravelly voice. Jill looked confused. "I only rode it once." "Twice," the operator growled. I don't think so." Before she could finish, the man pulled a long silver whistle from his pocket and blew. No sound came out, but Jill clutched her ears and collapsed to her knees. "Hey," I shouted, rushing forward, but the man turned his head toward me. His hollow eyes glowed faintly, and I froze, unable to move. "Rules are rules," he said. Jill screamed as he dragged her behind the carousel. When I finally regained control, I ran after them, but they were gone. The carousel's music continued to play, but the painted horses now had red streaks dripping from their mouths. I found Brian and Trevor near the Ferris wheel. "Something's wrong," I told them, breathless. "Where's Jill?" Trevor asked. I explained what happened, but Brian waved it off. "You're just spooked. It's a carnival. They're supposed to freak you out." But Trevor believed me. "We should leave. Now." Brian groaned. "You guys are such buzzkills." "Fine, let's get Lisa and go." We found Lisa near the food stalls, but something was wrong. She was sitting on a bench, clutching her stuffed bear, rocking back and forth. "Lisa?" Trevor asked cautiously. She turned to look at us, and my stomach dropped. Her eyes were wrong. The whites were gone, replaced by swirling shades of black and gray. "They don't like when you break the rules," she whispered. "What did you do?" Trevor demanded. Lisa didn't answer. She just laughed, a shrill, echoing sound that didn't seem to come from her mouth. Behind her, shadows began to move. We ran. I don't know why Brian decided to split off, but when I turned to look for him, he was gone. The carnival had changed. The paths twisted in impossible ways, leading us back to places we'd already been. The performers were no longer pretending to be human. Their painted faces stretched unnaturally, their limbs bending at impossible angles as they pursued us. At one point, Trevor tripped. I turned back to help him, but a pair of skeletal hands burst from the ground and dragged him screaming into the dirt. I kept running. The clock struck midnight, and the lights of the carnival began to flicker and die. When I finally reached the exit, a familiar figure stood in my path. The clown from the ticket booth. "Leaving so soon?" he asked, grinning wide enough to show rows of needle-like teeth. "I followed the rules," I shouted. "You did," he admitted. "But your friends didn't. And the carnival always collects its due." Behind him, I saw Jill, Brian, Lisa, and Trevor. They were part of the carnival now, painted faces, twisted bodies, and all. Jill's carousel horse was the first to move, its hollow eyes glowing as it reared back and whinnied. "See you next year," the clown said. The last thing I heard was the sound of laughter, echoing, inhuman, and eternal. But it wasn't the end. I woke up in the middle of the forest, sprawled on damp earth. The carnival was gone. No flashing lights, no twisted rides, no haunting laughter. Just silence, broken occasionally by the rustling of leaves in the cold night wind. For a moment, I thought it was all a nightmare, until I noticed my hands. They were smeared with dirt and streaked with faint red stains. My legs ached, my clothes were torn, and I had a pounding headache. Stumbling to my feet, I saw something glinting in the moonlight, a torn ticket stub, crumpled and damp, sticking out of my pocket. "Return next year." I wanted to scream, but no sound came out. When I finally made it back to town, it was almost dawn. Everything was eerily normal. No one seemed to notice I was missing. When I told people about the carnival, they laughed it off. "Oh, that's just the old Halloween fair. Been gone for decades." One shopkeeper chuckled. Decades? It didn't make sense. I had photos on my phone from that night, Lisa with her creepy bear, Jill on the carousel, Brian grinning like a fool, but when I checked, my phone was wiped clean. Not even a single text message remained. Desperate for answers, I visited the town library. It wasn't long before I found the stories. Rumors of a carnival that appeared every October in the 1920s. People would go missing, only to return days later, raving about clowns and cursed rides. Some never came back at all. The carnival was blamed for everything from freak accidents to mysterious deaths, but it always disappeared without a trace. No one believed the survivors. And I knew, deep down, I wouldn't be an exception. I tried to move on, but the memories wouldn't let me. Every night, I dreamed of the carnival. In some dreams, I saw Lisa clutching her cursed bear, her eyes hollow and lifeless. In others, Brian laughed as twisted clowns dragged him into the shadows. Sometimes I was back in the maze-like paths, running, always running, but never escaping. The laughter haunted me most of all. Worse, strange things began happening in my everyday life. Objects would move on their own. My reflection in the mirror sometimes didn't move with me. Once, I woke up to find a balloon animal, a giraffe, sitting on my nightstand. Its twisted smile seemed to mock me. The ticket stub I found in my pocket never left me. No matter how many times I threw it away, it always reappeared, tucked into my wallet, under my pillow, or even inside the fridge. "Return next year, or we'll come for you." I tried everything to avoid it. On October 31st, I left town, driving as far as I could. But no matter how far I went, the fog found me. Roads looped back to familiar landmarks, and my car spotted and died just outside the same forest where the carnival had been. It was back. The lights flickered in the distance, drawing me in like a moth to a flame. This time, I didn't try to run. The ticket taker was waiting for me at the entrance. His painted smile was wider, more grotesque than before. "Welcome back," he rasped, holding out a gloved hand. Wordlessly, I handed him the ticket stub. The carnival was just as I remembered, only worse. The air reeked of burnt sugar and decay. The rides creaked ominously, and the performers. They weren't pretending to be human anymore. A contortionist folded themselves into impossible shapes, their bones cracking with each move. A strong man lifted an anvil with a single, grotesquely stretched arm while his other hung limp, clearly broken. But it wasn't the performers that terrified me. It was the faces I recognized. Brian was running the Ferris wheel now, his once cheerful grin frozen into a mask of despair. Jill's voice echoed from the carousel, but she wasn't on it, she was it. Her face was carved into the horses, their hollow eyes staring at me as they bobbed up and down. And Lisa. I found her at the dart game. She handed me a set of darts, her movements stiff and puppet-like. Her bear sat on the counter, its eyes glowing faintly. "I told you not to break the rules," she whispered. Her voice was layered, as though a dozen other voices were speaking through her. I wanted to run, but something stopped me. As I wandered deeper into the carnival, the fog thickened. Shadows moved in the corners of my vision, and the laughter grew louder. It wasn't coming from the clowns or the rides, it was coming from the very ground beneath my feet. Eventually, I reached the big top. The massive tent loomed over me, its red and white stripes faded and tattered. Inside, I found the ringmaster. He was tall, impossibly tall, his top hat brushing the roof of the tent. His face was pale, almost featureless, except for his wide, painted smile. "You've returned," he said, his voice echoing like it came from everywhere at once. I didn't have a choice, I spat. "None of you ever do," he replied, gesturing around the tent. The shadows moved, and I saw them, every soul the carnival had claimed. Brian, Jill, Lisa, Trevor, and countless others. Their faces stared back at me from the walls, the floor, the very fabric of the tent. "This place feeds on you," the ringmaster explained. "Your fear, your mistakes, your defiance. It thrives on broken rules." "What do you want from me?" I demanded. "To join us, of course," he said, leaning in close. His grin stretched impossibly wide. "Unless you're willing to make a trade." I knew it was a trap, but I didn't have a choice. "What kind of trade?" I asked. The ringmaster's eyes glittered with amusement. "Bring us new guests. 5 souls for your freedom." It was monstrous. It was wrong. But I nodded. "Excellent," he said, handing me a deck of carnival tickets. "Your freedom lasts until the next October. If you fail to deliver, we'll take you back, and anyone you care about." I've tried to warn people. I've tried to tell them the rules. But every year, I have to return with 5 new victims. Every year, the carnival takes them, twisting them into something else. The tickets never run out. And the laughter never stops.